Hello, everyone. If you're staying on, can you hear me? Can you see me? Um, I'm not sure what you're right. Motoko says yes. Great. Um, it's a pity in a way that this can't be completely interactive, actually. But anyway, Motoko has put these really interesting questions into the chat. And I'll read them out and then I'll just give my answer to them. When I've finished speaking, I'll scroll down to the bottom of the chat if there's anything else there that anyone else wants to add or to contribute to that. But Motoko's first question that she's put to me is, what could be the main incentives driving force for the whole school approach in practice in Europe? And the answer here, if we're really talking about why would a school do this and why would a school want to do this, I think there are two answers to this question. One is top down and the other is bottom up. One could be, the driving force could actually be instructions from the Ministry of Education. It's as simple as that. There are some educational systems in Europe, we know, which are very highly centralized, and the schools have to do what the ministry dictates. And sometimes this is actually a statutory requirement of the school. So if the education ministry wants to implement the reference framework in the education system in their country, quite simply, they could order schools to do this, which isn't necessarily the best way to go about it, to buy in sort of support from the schools themselves and from the education profession. But that is certainly one thing that can happen. And there may be the opportunity, I hope, later today in the round table where we'll have two people who are one from an education ministry in Ireland and somebody else who is working with the education ministry in Ukraine. And they'll be able to talk more about things from the ministry point of view. From a school point of view, and a much better incentive, I think, is where a school decides, because it's part of their school mission and their desire to create better citizens from the children who are attending the school, that the school itself decides freely to go down this route. So in terms of the motivation driving force, I think one is the sort of top-down one, the other is the bottom-up one coming from the school itself. And it's because the school itself either has within its mission that they are seeking to create better citizens for the future who are able to deal with the complexities of the modern world, because our view actually is these competencies are actually required. There've been many reports from bodies like OECD and the British Council and so on, and an organization in the USA, 21st Century Skills, which is basically saying these are precisely the competencies that young people are going to need to enter the workforce when they leave school as well. And these are the very skills that in the 21st century, in a networked, hyper mediatized and connective world, that sort of world that we now live in, these are precisely the skills that individuals are going to need in their future lives. And so for that reason, a school wanting to do the best for its students, for its pupils, could well want to go down this route and use use this kind of approach. And a whole school approach seems to be, there is very good evidence there, I think, that a whole school approach is optimal for equipping young people in this sort of way. Okay, Motoko's second question: in order to promote the whole school approach, what structure is vital as readiness for implementation, or who are key persons? And then Motoko puts probably every participant question mark. Well, yes, but every participant would be ideal. Probably that's not going to be the case. I mean, the problem is teaching world, the world of education, has people at every stage of their careers. And we're very well aware that there are, for example, teachers who have perhaps up to 30, 35 years of teaching experience who find themselves in these schools. And the reality also is teachers are constantly having to deal with one new initiative after another, after another. And the reality is that teachers are overworked, overloaded, are basically asked by so many agencies and authorities to pick up on and deal with and even prevent every sort of societal ill or problem that is going. So the demands on teachers are absolutely phenomenal. And I can easily see teachers in those sorts of situations absolutely not wanting to face the upheaval of this kind of implementation, this kind of new initiative. I can fully understand that. All the stuff that teachers have to deal with on a day-to-day basis is quite phenomenal. So who are the key persons? Well, one key person for a whole school approach, the key person for a whole school approach, is the school leader. It's the school principal. That is a key person. And we know that if the school principal isn't on board, it's basically not going to happen properly. You have to have buy-in from the head teacher. That is absolutely crucial. But implementation, I hope I didn't give the impression, I probably did because there wasn't time to talk about it. This is not an instantaneous process. It isn't a matter of looking at the school and thinking, right, what is everything that needs changing if we're to introduce a whole school approach? Rather, it is, where are the areas where the needs are most pressing? Where do we need to make the improvements as a first step? That requires an analysis and review of where the school is at the present time in relationship to a whole school approach, and identifying particular areas of need. Then it's a matter, I think, of the school actually consulting with stakeholders, and the stakeholders are teachers, they are children, they are teachers' parents, and depending what area it is, it might be with external organizations in the local community or whatever, but with the key stakeholders, basically consulting with them and getting their views and eliciting their reactions and finding out what the best approach to take is to change this particular aspect of the school environment, of the way the school is functioning. Then to come up with an action plan to address that issue, then to implement the action plan on that specific issue, and then to review a little way down the line what is. So you go back to the beginning of the cycle, it's a cyclical process. And you go to an analysis, a review of how the school is functioning and what the needs actually are. And then basically going round the cycle again. Now, one route round, going round that cycle just once could take, I don't know, in reality, it could take an entire school year, if not longer, could even be longer. So we're talking about lots of iterations, I think, that are going to have to take place. And the hope is that by doing it through a consultative process with all the stakeholders, which will include, you know, the overworked and hacked off teachers who just can't face the thought of another change in the school, you know, hopefully you will bring them on board and it'll become much more feasible by getting buy-in from the different stakeholders. So, you know, basically, it's not an instantaneous thing that you can suddenly introduce a whole school approach. I think it's a very gradual thing. You've got to do it sort of strand by strand until after it would probably take a good few years to work through the process. I think it could easily take up to 4 or 5 years to actually feel satisfied that you have introduced a whole school approach in your school. It's not an instantaneous thing, but in answer to Motoko's actual question, the key person is the school principal. They have to be on board because without them, it's not going to happen. Okay, Motoko's third question, although citizenship education is highly valued among amongst Japanese public elementary schools, how can we add the aspect of intercultural onto the citizenship education, where very less intercultural encounters are occurring? One of my answers could be to encourage the pupils to find internal diversity. You also mentioned using medias to show such diversity. Any other effective ways? Right, well, you, Motoko, do indeed identify one possibility, internal diversity, because even if ethnically and religiously and racially, let's say, you are operating in a very homogeneous environment, even in that environment, there are internal cultural differences. For example, there are cultural differences. Cultures only aren't only at the level of nation or ethnicity or religion. They are also at the level of everyday small cultures, as some people call them. So, for example, there are differences in male culture versus female culture. There are gender differences in the ways in which men and women, or boys and girls, often go about things. There are differences between the younger pupils in your schools and the older pupils in your schools as well. So those would be small cultures, small cultural differences, but you could draw upon those. You could develop activities, learning activities with the children to think about the different ways that boys and girls might go about doing something, and you can actually get them to talk to each other about what they think are their differences. And it would be talking about gender stereotypes very often would be the case. And I think what you would find is a breaking down of the gender stereotypes through open and meaningful and productive dialogue between the boys and the girls about precisely what the differences are between boys and girls, if it's handled in a sensitive manner. But the other way is basically to use the internet. We have the internet nowadays. The internet is an extraordinary thing that can connect us. You know, there you are, Motoko, in Japan, and here I am in London, and we are having communication with each other. We are talking to each other. We can do this, and school kids can do this. And there is a very inspiring book that I can recommend to you all, which is edited by, now I can't remember all the sequences of authors, but by Mike Byram and his colleagues. Mike is responsible for developing a strand of research activity on what he calls intercultural citizenship and intercultural citizenship education. And he's spearheaded a whole line of research and studies, basically in which children, pupils in one country twin with a school in another country, and the children are set project. The teachers work together in the two schools, and they set up a citizenship project which is linked to intercultural issues, and that actually requires intercultural communication and dialogue to take place for the kids to work successfully on the project. And the kids are given a project, so this is project-based learning. They're given a project to work on, and they have to collaborate through the internet on the project. And Mike's research, you know, the researchers who have engaged in this line of work, they've done detailed studies. It's qualitative research, but it's fascinating for the insight it gives you into the insights that the kids actually pick up during the course of conducting the project with the people in the other country. And so that is a very obvious way. That's one way. But more simply, I mean, you know, there are then also in some places, I'm aware this isn't necessarily so much the case in Japan, but in, you know, in England, for example, there may be pretty much monoethnic schools, monocultural schools. For example, in rural areas of East England, there are pretty monocultural schools, but they could hook up with schools in multicultural cities, in Birmingham or in London, for example, and the kids could be set activities, learning activities or projects to work on with each other through the internet as the medium for exchanges. And I think that is another incredible, again, we know that there was recently published a meta-analysis of studies of internet contact of this kind on intercultural attitudes. And the meta-analysis shows absolutely unambiguously this is good for enhancing intercultural attitudes. So you can certainly do this kind of thing. And we know from the scientific evidence that it can be very, very effective. So there are lots of things that one can suggest, but those are the most obvious ones that come to my mind. Motoko, can you switch on your mic and see if you can speak? Because I can see that. I can hear you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Do you have anything, that you'd like to come back to? I'm just scrolling down as well in the chat function.
Thank you so much for taking your time to answer my questions, and thank you very much for allowing me to be involved in the panelist. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for asking your questions, because I think they're incredibly important. I mean, the reference framework is so big and there is so much that one can actually talk about that, we could be here all day long. But in an hour's presentation, I really couldn't mention very much at all. And your questions actually gave me a wonderful opportunity to talk about further issues, further things. So thank you for that. We have someone.
And Motoko, thanks for your gracious comments yesterday. Now I can put comments to a face. So thank you very much, Motoko.
Right. Nora, is there a way, or is Morgan still there? CVSIT. There is someone, Eglantina.
Yes. Yeah, Egla is waiting to ask a question. Or probably she already has a question in the chat.
No, I can't see it in the chat.
Okay.
Have you got access to speaking at your end?
We just promoted Egla to panelists. So let's see here. Egla, can you hear us? No. But I can, I can read out her question if you want.
She just joined as a panelist.
Yeah, okay.
Excellent. Egla, would you like to switch on your microphone and ask your question?
No.
Okay. So what she actually says in the chat is, a way to prevent dropout from school, a best intervention would be like, well, preventing dropout from school, from my perspective, I mean, I think this is a question really for practitioners to answer rather than for someone like me, but I would say that the best way is to have inspiring teachers who are giving kids really meaningful activities which they themselves can relate to, so that they don't feel that they're just sitting in school learning very academic matters and not seeing the purpose of what they are learning, but are actually learning things that they can see are directly relevant to their real lives. But I'm not sure I'm actually the best person to address this question. I mean, if we have anybody, Motoko, are you still here? I can't see. Motoko is a teacher trainer in Japan. Huh?
I'm here.
You're here. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that question? The best way to prevent dropout from school, a best intervention, or indeed if there's anyone else here in the audience who is still online who would like to, attempt to stab at this question. I mean, it is a very profound and important.
So this question is about the higher education, the high school level dropout, or?
She doesn't say in the question. This is why I was hoping she could come online and could actually ask her question in person, because it's not as clear in the chat as it might be. But
she actually has a role as a panelist, but
primary. Eglantina is there. Primary, she is asking for.
Oh, primary school level.
Yes. Oh, so Motoko,
I see.
you're primary. You are a primary school teacher,
Right.
trainer.
We do not have, I mean, the students cannot drop out in the primary school level. So they, so I didn't really get the meaning of dropout in the primary level, but we have a system which is, you know, it's a public education, and from 1 through 9th grade, they have to, you know, they have the right to be educated. So we, I don't know, the dropout in the primary level means the students repeat the same grade, or what do you mean by that?
But usually with the audio, so she's saying she's not able to talk. So
yes.
Yeah.
So she can't actually talk.
Minority students. There are minority students who are, I say, dropping out of school.
Right.
Well,
I mean, this actually is a huge agenda, isn't it? Because, you know, this relates to the whole issue of quality.
I see.
And inclusion of Roma and Egyptian communities. Yeah. This is all about quality education and inclusive education, which are absolutely at the heart of equitable education. And these are, of course, major issues.
So they need to have the linguistic support for the mainstream education to catch up with the mainstream.
They absolutely have to have mainstream, you know, be integrated, and they have to receive quality education. And oh, right, yes. Sonia says, Vasi and Cornelia, are you here? Because Vasi and of course, Vasi and Cornelia are based in Bulgaria and Romania. Vasi, are you here? And Cornelia, are you here?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can. We can.
Okay, because I'm with my students classroom, so it could be a little bit noisy.
Okay, carry on.
Okay. Okay. So could you tell me about? Okay. Is the lady from Japan? Because I didn't hear this.
Motoko is from Japan, but Egla, I'm not sure where you are from. What country are you working in? Albania. Okay.
Okay, Albania. Well, as you know, okay. As you know, I work with students from the secondary level, but well, could you repeat again the question about the students from the primary level?
Well, how would you prevent dropout from school? What would be the best intervention to keep those children within the school system and to keep them learning, to keep them receiving a quality education from which they will benefit subsequently?
Yes, Vasi, especially with pupils of minority, yes, because you have a lot of pupils of Roma.
Okay, okay. We have a lot of national programs which help us with, for example, the food. We have free meal, free breakfast at school, for example. Also, we work with the municipality and with the police. If someone don't come at school, the police will go and will ask why. And also, there are a lot of the connection between the institutions is really good, and I think that all students in Bulgaria they have to go to school. So this is the main point. And even in the small towns, we don't have a lot of students because our population prefer to live abroad, not in our country. So we are taking care of our students. Thank you.
Thanks, Vasi. Basically, Egla, I would suggest you have a look. I've just put in here a web link to the Council of Europe resources. I mean, Council of Europe has a huge amount of materials, particularly on Roma. Roma receive a lot of attention at the Council of Europe. And there are lots and lots of materials there. That's one web link. I'll try and find another because there is material specifically on Roma education as well. Actually, if you click on that web link and you go down to the bottom of that page, there's a Roma Youth Action Plan, and it talks about inclusion of Roma youth in particular. So there are a lot of resources there that you can actually find on the Council of Europe website. If you go in and you just search through, or even from Google, to get to that web link, I simply put Roma Council of Europe, and that was one of the web links that came up that I clicked on. And there's a lot of materials there. The Council of Europe is very concerned with the whole issue of quality inclusion. It's partly because of the SDGs that this has come up, but it's actually a very long-standing concern in the Council of Europe to ensure that minority children and adolescents are retained within education, within the system. And I think you'll find a lot of advice and guidance and action plans there on the Council of Europe website. So I would say just go on there and have a look around and see what you can find, because I'm pretty sure you'll find materials that will give much more direct answers to your question, more concrete answers, should we say, than we've been able to provide here. Okay.
But Martin,
yes,
if I may follow up with a question, I mean,
yes,
with
sure.
respect to the democratic and intercultural competencies that have been talked about, will these competencies have some implications for minority youth to be retained in school?
Well, the simple answer there is absolutely yes, because if you adopt a whole school, I mean, there are studies of situations where whole school approach, particularly based upon human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the children's, you know, the Convention on the Rights of Children, Human Rights of Children, have actually been implemented as a basis for running the school using a whole school approach. And what you actually find is the most extraordinary set of findings. Not only do the children learn about human rights and start to, well, but importantly, they start to apply them in their everyday lives and in their interactions with their fellow students. And you find far less conflict within the school happening. You find dramatic reductions in racism and discrimination within the school. You find minority children feeling much more accepted and a part of the school. And interestingly, what you also find is academic standards within the school go up dramatically as well. Very significant improvement. So I think there's no question that the evidence is out there that basically introducing this kind of approach in and of itself would help to retain the students in the school. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Yes, Motoko, thank you. Just reading your comment here in the chat, very, very interesting. Yeah, the term children's voices, which is Sonia's term, really, I think, you know, we mean expression of desires and wants and needs and visions and feelings about the school, about the world, and so on. Yeah, you know, children's voices really does capture what we mean by all of those in a very succinct phrase. So we have Sonia to thank for coining that term in the title of this project, actually. So yes, this, you know, the CVS project does provide an excellent opportunity to see how the reference framework has actually been implemented, and we're evaluating the implementation. You know, Harriet's presentation, it's a real, you know, because of the pandemic, everything got knocked back, because the intention had been at this conference to present the evaluation of the implementation, but basically the data are only being collected now, and so one will have to wait for those outcomes to actually be published, to come out. But
I really enjoyed
Sonia,
yesterday's Children's Voices presentation. I've heard a lot of children's voices yesterday, and I really enjoyed the skit, the drama, the Little Red Riding Hood. Their conversion was really impressive to me. You know, the message contained in the skit was very, very impressive. They're not only, you know, you cannot judge the person by appearance, but the words or attitudes are really have the real meaning of the person. So it was very nice. And also the slideshows, which showed me, you know, the real experience of the children at the school, and I really enjoyed.
Thank you. In the afternoon, yes, Motoko, in the afternoon, we will have the messages of pupils to politicians. And so
right.
I hope you can enjoy also these videos that our teachers prepared in their school. Thank you.
Right. It's the ultimate goal of the citizenship education, right? To make actions for the society. And thank you.
That's right. Okay, I think I'm going to dip out now because I want a cup of coffee. Otherwise, I'm going to fall asleep in the next. And I have to be there for Anna's Christine's presentation. So thank you ever so much indeed, Motoko, for raising all of these questions and for initiating this sort of little impromptu discussion during the coffee break. But, you know, if you want to carry on talking, please do. But I'm going to go and get a cup of coffee because it's on my throat now with all the speaking.
Thank you. Yeah, let's have a
break.
coffee break. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.